Tēnā koutou katoa, e te mana whenua nei tuahuriri tēnā koutou. Ko Matthew Turnbull toku ingoa, nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody, it's a great pleasure to welcome you here this evening. My name's Matthew Turnbull. And as it says up on the screen behind me, I'm a professor and head of School of Biological Sciences here at the University of Canterbury. So I'm really pleased to sort of start the ball rolling this evening. I hope you're going to have an interesting evening, an inspiring one. We've got some interesting stories to be told, and we have 6 very different people telling 6 very different stories, all to the sort of the aim of trying to persuade you that with science anything is possible. And I'm pretty sure that they're going to achieve that by the end of the evening. Welcome, folks. And a really important theme of the evening is that science is a very broad church of activities. People start in very different places and they end up in very different places. From my point of view, I guess I started my science career in a way that's pretty typical of most people, perhaps. As a young fella, I was just really interested in how things worked. I was interested in chemistry and physics. I guess I sort of ended up focusing on biology because I sort of felt like that when biology brings chemistry and physics together, something really special happens, and so I ended up being a biologist. Physicists and chemists will disagree with me probably, but and science has taken me to a lot of places. I'm particularly interested in how plants work and how they deal with the sort of the constraints and the stresses that life out there in the real world throws at them. And that interest has taken me from the rainforests of Queensland to the Arctic tundra in Alaska to the forests of North America and to the mountains and shrublands and forests here in New Zealand. So science can take you to all sorts of places, and you're going to find that out through the examples that we're going to give this evening. So I'm going to stop talking in a minute, and for the moment my role is to introduce the MC, the Master of Ceremonies for the evening, which is my colleague Anne Brower, who's a senior lecturer in geography at the university here, and she's going to kind of keep the ball rolling with our special guests this evening. So I hope you have a really great evening and enjoy the talks.
Great, well welcome to the University of Canterbury. My name is Anne Brower, and as Matthew said, I teach geography and environmental science here at UC. I'm one of the newest members of staff. I came a very long distance a few months ago. I came all the way from Lincoln University to Canterbury University. But before that, I had a bit of a journey through science as well. I grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, which is symbolized by the little blue foot. And I went to, I studied environmental science and economics. And I then ended up at University of California at Berkeley, go Bears. And I came to New Zealand originally on a Fulbright grant just after finishing my PhD. And during my Fulbright grant, I ended up studying, as Matthew said, science can take you in all sorts of different directions. I ended up studying over there on the left, the South Island High Country. And for my sins, the North and South magazine called me the chirpy Antichrist, because I discovered a few things about what was happening in the high country that not everybody was happy with. And later on, science takes you all sorts of places. A few years ago here on your right, I guess, I ended up sharing the stage with Nick Smith, who was then the Minister of Building and Housing, because I had, over about 5 or 6 years, used my science training to, as we say, speak truth to power. And just by speaking the truth as I saw it to the minister, he eventually, after a very, very long journey, saw fit to change the Building Act. But most of my work is about that South Island high country, and sort of what Matthew talked about, how plants interact with the ecosystems. As a geographer, I look at how people interact with ecosystems. And so my work tends to revolve in those circles. But in my half a year at University of Canterbury, I can assure you that the University of Canterbury is an inspiring and inspired place to work and study. The College of Science will be quite it'll prepare you well, because your generation faces a lot of challenges in this world. And your job is quite simply to change the world. And our job is to show you how. And tonight we have some really exciting graduates of the College of Science who will tell you about how they're changing the world. And so I really look forward to hearing from them. Just a bit of business before we move on too far. In the event of an earthquake, drop, cover, and hold, and the exits are clearly marked. The toilets are right around, and then you just snake your way down to the back of the building. And I think that's about it for business. Throughout the night, we have a number of university staff here. We have, from the College of Science, we have Anna Chapman, Bengu Yalcin, who are both student advisors, and Sarah Casely and Tamsin Laird, who are in the outreach and engagement teams. And we also have some of the liaison staff from the university as well. And they and our alums and both Matthew and I will be available to, we'd love to chat with you during the break. So how tonight's going to work, we're going to hear from each of our speakers, who range from a traffic engineer to stormwater management to entrepreneur and biotech innovators. We're going to hear from a couple of them, and then we're going to have a break, and then we're going to come back and hear from a couple more. And in your packs, you got a little card with elements on it. And during this talk, all of these talks, we'd like for you to think about sort of what change you'd like to make. Because it is your job to change the world. So get started thinking about how, and then we'll see you at the College of Science, and we'll teach you what you need to know to make those changes. Next week, if anybody's interested, I'm giving a UC Connect lecture on the Little Guy's Guide to Making a Difference. So that'll be a week from Thursday at 7 o'clock. So first up, we have Bevan, who is a senior associate in traffic engineering. And I'll hand it over to Bevan. Okay, I'll find you.
Thank you very much.
Just start.
So yes, I'm a traffic engineer / transport planner. Technically, don't boo. Thanks. I technically describe myself as a transport planner more than a traffic engineer.
I'll find it.
You'll find it?
Yeah, you go.
Excellent. I work for a consultancy, was TDG, which was New Zealand's largest specialist transport consultancy. Currently, we're integrating with a larger company called Stantec. There we go.
Yep.
And so Stantec is what we call a multidisciplinary engineering company. So they do a wide range of engineering services, design services, architectural services, geotech, geology, et cetera, and traffic is one part of that. Stantec's, as I said, is a much larger company. It's originally based in Canada, but has offices around the world. You may wonder what a consultant is. Basically, we sell professional services, which means when a client could be a government, could be a private developer, could be a council, when they want a specialist piece of work done, they may engage a consultant to do that. And so I'm a good example of that because I'm a specialist traffic modeler or a transport modeler. And what we do is, and what I've done over my career over a number of years, is we build traffic networks and traffic models. So this model here is of Napier, one that we've done quite recently. It's called a microsimulation model. The reason it's called a microsimulation model is because, as you can now see, it models the individual cars as they move through the network. My colleague who put this together for me, there must be something special happening in Napier during this particular movie that you're seeing, because there's an awful lot of police cars and fire engines driving around. So maybe they're undergoing some sort of emergency event at the moment. So we use these models basically to test things out, to find out what would happen if we turned this roundabout into a set of traffic lights, or what would happen if we turned a two-way road into a one-way road, or a one-way road into a two-way road, and vice versa. And so we test out things, we investigate them for the council, and we see what happens. We analyse them and get outputs, and it goes as far as even working out whether they're the best value for money. So what option's the best at this intersection? What gives you the best bang for buck, as people like to say. So that's sort of my background and what I do day to day. Here at the University of Canterbury, I studied a degree in science, majoring in maths and physics. I also did a degree in music at the same time here, majoring in composition. And what I guess enjoyed about that was the diversity, I guess, which you can figure out a little bit for yourselves. So the diversity ranging from the maths element, which was pure maths, lots of equations and complicated stuff, physics, which is a bit more practical, and experimental physics, which involves lab work and those sorts of things. And often treat our traffic models are a bit like an experiment. We're trying to test a hypothesis, see which thing works best. That's the same sort of principles that you do in a lab experiment. And ranges through to obviously the music and the creativity side. So it was, the diversity of papers is something I really enjoyed so far. So in my career, I started 17, 18 years ago here in Christchurch as a transport planner, building the nuts and bolts of traffic models. I went to Auckland for about 18 months before I got less interested in living in Auckland, but they've got a few more traffic problems than we do down here, so there's a few more challenging issues in Auckland to deal with, as I'm sure most people are aware. And then I lived for 5 years in Edinburgh in Scotland, where I was, as well as doing consultancy work and doing option testing and analysis, I also was I trained people in how to use the software. So I was a software support trainer, and I got to travel around the UK. The boringest place I ever went was Swindon. It's got nothing going for it. But I did get to go to some good places like Utrecht, just outside Amsterdam, and I got to go to Cyprus and Hong Kong, teaching training courses as well. So there was good and bad. Well, Swindon does have some very interesting roundabouts, which if you're a traffic engineer is kind of exciting. And finally, back here in Christchurch, just in time for the earthquakes, and I'm involved at the council part-time, and for my sins I work in a part of the council called CTOC, the Transport Operations Centre, and you'd sometimes see them quoted in the paper when this traffic is bad, usually. And we at CTOC, the team that I work with, we approve the traffic management plans on the network, the roadworks, and one of my jobs is to look at the whole network and try to work out how much stress we can put put it under with roadworks. And you probably all feel like it's too much. Believe me, people have asked for a lot more. So we're holding back the tide a little bit at times on traffic impacts across our network. And, it's a pretty challenging environment at times. The people that are building the roads and constructing them want to take a lot of road space, and we really need to test that and make sure that it's working effectively and efficiently. And as well as being at the council, I still work back with my consultancy, and there's sort of a picture of our local team up there at the right. And when I was putting this together, one of my junior colleagues had put together a presentation for a future and tech presentation at one of the schools, and I flicked through her slides, and she's just quite new, and she described our colleagues as intimidating old people. So I guess that's the point of my career that I'm at the moment. There was a number of things I could have talked about during this presentation, and one of which was what really gives me the most interest and satisfaction in my work. And testing alternatives is one thing that I really like to look at to figure out what's the best option in this location, or whether it is just going to work or not. And one of these little examples, it's a very, very small example, but proved to be quite interesting. The picture here is of Hallsville Junction Road off the Southern Motorway, and you can just make out, I'll see if this works, can I circle it, these traffic lights here. Now, someone came up with the idea that in the morning coming out of Prebbleton on Springs Road, there's quite a big delay, and someone came up with the idea that maybe we could put a set of traffic lights on the approach to the roundabout, something we called a meter. So you meter the traffic, and it just creates gaps in the flow of traffic for Springs Road. And it's fair to say that one of these doesn't exist in the South Island yet. There are a few of these in Auckland. It's fair to say that the local traffic engineers thought that this wasn't necessarily a good idea. And so me and some colleagues put together a really good traffic model, made sure it was what we call calibrated, so it matches the existing conditions really well, put the plan into the model, and it demonstrated that in the morning this was really effective at reducing the delays on Springs Road. And it's that giving that confidence to clients is one of the things that I really enjoy, and so I had no qualms about this thing going in on street and the fact that it would work, and it has proved to do so. It reduces the delays on Springs Road by about 5 or 6 minutes every morning, and you'll know yourself, if you drive, if you commute, you get days which are really, really bad, and it seems to have also alleviated those really bad days as well. So that was kind of one of the areas of satisfaction, is just giving clients a bit of confidence that things are going to work. And finally, I thought I'd sort of wrap up by talking about the transport industry, which is really coming into the eye of the media a lot at the moment, both in terms of oh, has that got sound? That's interesting. Hopefully I don't swear in the background or anything, because I actually took that video. Anyway, so transport's coming into the media in a big way. Both, the problems that we have in New Zealand, Auckland, our biggest city, media is really hot on that. Even the Southland Times, looking at the pros and cons of the Auckland fuel tax. Wellington also, big transport issues to deal with there. And then the other element of transport that's in the media at the moment, or even in the public eye, is what's going to happen in the future with transport and autonomous vehicles and various elements like that. So mobility as a service is one. That's a concept where effectively, rather than having individual modes of transport, you join them all up. So you might have an app on your phone that lets you use a bike share scheme, as well as use a taxi or an Uber, as well as catch a bus. And so you pay for mobility across a range of what we call travel modes. And then, the autonomous vehicle, and that's actually an autonomous vehicle running in Christchurch's road network. The flying taxi concept, which again, intriguingly tested in Christchurch, rumour has it. And the Yike bike, which is again a Christchurch guy, so kind of intriguing to see even here in Christchurch the future of transport coming to the fore. And my personal favourite is the Futurama sucky person loop thing. Although I did say I was going to say this in this presentation, and one of my colleagues pointed out that maybe that will make you seem really old because they might not understand that reference. Anyway, so yeah, it's quite an exciting time to be working in the transport industry is how I thought I'd wrap up today.
Thank you, Bevan. Before we hear from Sophie, who's an engineering geologist, it'd be nice to get to know you a little bit better. So you can come on up, Sophie. I understand that quite a few of you are high school students. How many of you are in year 13? Yeah, and year 12? Okay, thinking ahead. Very good, very good. How many of you are little siblings? So thinking very much ahead. And parents and caregivers? And so who do we reckon came from the furthest? Who's from outside of Christchurch? Cameraman, you don't count. Okay, who is from more than 100 kilometers away? Only one. Okay, where are you guys from? Oregon, right. Well, North Carolina is further than that. Welcome from Oregon.
That's commitment.
So next up, we have Sophie, who will be talking about engineering geology. Here we go, Sophie.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm an engineering geologist and I work for a ground engineering and environmental consultancy called Golder. And it's been 8 years since I finished up at the University of Canterbury and I've been working at that consultancy. And I want to talk to you about why you should choose a career in geology. So there were 3 things I knew at high school, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. I knew that I liked mega engineering structures. I used to stay up late at night watching those mega engineering shows on the documentary channel, and I was really interested in particularly dams, but power stations, bridges, tunnels, anything that was big. And I also knew that I really liked science. At high school, I was quite interested in physics and chemistry and also maths, and I suppose like Matthew said, I liked working out how things worked, and I also really enjoyed having a problem and solving a problem, and that just really resonated with me. But I also knew that I had the attention span of a goldfish, and in order for me to actually move forward and enjoy anything, I needed to have diversity and variability in my life, and that definitely has not changed. So it made sense to me to come down to Christchurch and study from Auckland and study engineering. I didn't actually start out in geology. I liked engineering structures, and so I decided to do an engineering degree. But for a number of reasons, that didn't really resonate with me. There was a few things like mechanical engineering that I could just never get my head around. So a friend over a beer said, why don't you give a geology paper a try? So I thought I'd do a Find Myself semester, which included a few different things like French and astrophysics. But it didn't take long before I settled on geology, and going back to the diversity thing, it really ticked all my boxes. The University of Canterbury has an incredible, the lecturers are incredible here. They come from all around the world, and there are some that have also been trained locally. So you're learning from some of the best in the world. You're in the lab, you're getting intimate with the rocks and looking at them through a microscope, so you've got that aspect. But the best thing is the field trips. Geological time is slow. It takes tens, hundreds of millions of years for anything to happen, and that can seem a little bit boring, but not in New Zealand apparently. We have active volcanic fields, we have earthquakes happening all around us, we have landslides, And so we can actually study these processes in a very geologically dynamic environment. It's also an incredible opportunity to get to know the people that have common interests with you. And I've made some of my best friends through geology that I'm still friends with today. And I think the geology field trips are the envy of the rest of the University of Canterbury students. I mean, I might be biased, but they're very fun. So once I finished studying my Bachelor of Science in Geology and then my Masters of Science in Engineering Geology, there's lots of different directions you can go with geology, and I focused on engineering geology because I liked the engineering structures. I started up at the consultancy that I still work at now. What does a graduate engineering geologist do? Well, they get their hands dirty, and for me, I spent the first couple of years of my career looking at the feasibility of an open cast coal mine on the west coast. So that was my office, and it was gnarly. I was living in Portacombs in the Southern Alps in 0-degree temperatures with 14 drillers and offsiders, and I was showering in little Portacom showers and eating chicken nuggets every night. But I learnt a lot in that process, and I really got to understand the fundamental concepts of geology, again in a really interesting geological environment. Basically looking at the rocks as they come out of the hole, working out what they are, and doing tests in the hole to work out what's going on in the earth. Fast forward a couple of years and I became an intermediate engineering geologist, and so as you progress through your career as an engineering geologist, you start to get a little bit more responsibility. And once I'd proved my ability to work in remote environments, which not everyone can do, but if that's something that you're interested in, the outdoors, then it's a really great area to be in. I got some really great international opportunities. I've been down to Antarctica twice and done the geotechnical investigation for the foundation design for Scott Base and McMurdo, which is the largest base in Antarctica, which can actually house over 1,000 people. And that was fascinating, looking at the way that the ice in the ground will impact the foundations and the buildings. I also spent 6 months in West Africa, which is a picture at the bottom, and I was getting flown by helicopter into these remote areas of Africa where they'd never seen a white person or a helicopter, and I would swap my plastic bottles with peanuts with the kids, and we were looking at a railway line and drilling again through some really interesting tropical soils that I'd never seen before. But also you start to take on more of an office-based role as you progress through your career as a geologist, and this is where you start to be able to look at that data that you're collecting in the field and the way that the geological processes work and the ground conditions that you're finding, and you can sort of put them into a framework that benefits your clients. So, things have to be done in a societal and political and economically viable way, and as you progress, you start to better understand policy and understand, you might want to do things a certain way, but there's limitations on that, and how does that all work? So it might not be as exciting as Africa and Antarctica, but on that very day, me and my friend both finished our pad on the same day. So, you do get your wins in the office as well. That was exciting to me. So now I'm at a point where I've got a few years under my belt in the field and in the office, and I'm starting to look forward in my career, and at some point you'll be at this point as well. And there's a few things that I know that I want to achieve, and one of them is providing a technically excellent service to my clients and for the benefit of myself, and I've put never stop learning there, and if you do any type of science, you're never going to stop learning if you're that kind of person. It's also really important to me to encourage and support other women in science and my peers and younger women that are starting to come through science and engineering. I'm hoping to see more equality over the next few decades of my career in that regard. And also, delivering projects, sustainability is a word that gets thrown around a lot these days, but I am very passionate about the environment, and you might say, oh, but you've worked in coal mining. And there has been some internal conflict for sure, but I think I'm really noticing just even in these 8 years that as an industry, we're really starting to actually engage in this rather than it being a tick box exercise. And it's really comforting to see that we are trying to do things in the best environment, in the most environmentally friendly way where possible. And I'm also going to always have fun along the way. The great thing about geology is it doesn't happen in the city. I mean, it does to a degree, civil infrastructure, but you've got your landslides, you've got your, earthquakes, you've got your dams, and they're going to be in really cool outdoorsy places. So hopefully I'll get to do a few more of those. And I guess the question I'm going to ask to you guys today, while you're thinking about where you want to go, is, where do you want to go? Geology is a plane ticket to a lot of really cool places in the world, for sure. So where do you physically want to go, but also what are you interested in? I'm talking to you about engineering geology because that's my experience, but geology can take you into so many directions. You can get involved with mining and like it or not, there's always going to be a demand for resources we're all consuming, but you can be the change, you can be the person that is promoting doing that in an environmentally friendly way. Water resources are only becoming more and more topical with rising sea level and droughts. Hazard mitigation, one of my best friends who did a PhD in engineering geology at Canterbury is currently flying around Norway in helicopters looking at landslide monitoring for protecting roads. There's tunnels, there's civil infrastructure, like I mentioned before, and hydropower. I mean, the list goes on. I actually work with a drilling company who are based in Wellington. I worked with them in Antarctica, and they've been approached by NASA to design a drill rig for the moon. So, I mean, you could become a moon geologist, a lunar geologist. There's so many options. I want to say that Confucius says, choose a job that you love and you will never have to work a day. And I can't claim that I haven't had to get down to the grind from time to time, and there's been times when I haven't always loved my job. But geology is a lot of fun. It's super practical. It's really outdoorsy. And if you're into that kind of thing, just, do one paper, give it a crack. And if I haven't convinced you yet, do it for the puns, because they're good and they kind of rock. Oh. Thank you.
Yeah, so if you like the outdoors, choose science, because geology is not the only degree with which you'll take field trips. You take field trips in Matthew's biology and ecology, and my geography and environmental science. So there's lots of opportunity to get out into the field. Have I missed any degrees where you do field trips? Oh, astronomy, yes. University of Canterbury has a couple of field stations at Mount John, which is down by Tekapo, and Cass, which was in your presentation. So I'm currently planning to take my second year class up to Cass. So next we have Logan Williams, who is an entrepreneur. And he did a bachelor's in psychology, and he has started a biomanufacturing company, which he will tell us about just after I find your presentation.
Just like that.
Logan.
Can you guys all hear me? Up the back as well? Good. Sweet. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen. I have presented to a collection of the world's greatest political, business and science leaders, but today, above all other days, I'm nervous. I'm nervous because I'm addressing potentially some of the world's future leaders who will hopefully join me in building a better future for the world. My name is Logan Williams. I'm a scientist, inventor and businessman whose life purpose is to use science to improve the world. I stand in front of you today having fully commercialised and sold 3 of my own revolutionary inventions dedicated to making a world a better place. My first invention I called Biome Innovation, which is a company that is dedicated to turning Didymo the algae, which is destroying our rivers, into paper, bioplastic, fabric, and biofuel, a method I invented. The goal of this company was to demonstrate to the world, and especially in New Zealand, that pests can be commercialised, taking a different approach to conservation, and ultimately to disrupt the materials engineering world, which is not very sustainable. Off the back of this success, I'm now in talks with 3 international organisations who are interested in purchasing the company and the invention alongside it. Following Biome, I created the company Polar Optic Vision, based on my invention of polarised contact lenses to help treat photophobia, light sensitivity, and epilepsy. I created this invention to help, in the first place, my friend who suffered from epilepsy after seeing her experience an epileptic fit in front of me, but also the thousands of people around New Zealand and the entire world that are suffering from conditions associated with light. At the beginning of this year, I sold this invention to Johnson & Johnson, the largest pharmaceutical company in the world. Now, my most current project, which of course I'm most excited about, is Biolina, which is a system that grows spirulina algae in effluent tanks, purifying contaminated water of nitrogen and phosphorus caused by effluent, whilst also creating a supplementary food source for livestock. So spirulina is a superfood. It contains all the proteins, vitamins, and minerals you need in your diet. So it's perfect for livestock and human consumption. So we can solve world hunger, purify New Zealand's waters, and create a more profitable and sustainable agricultural process in New Zealand. At the moment, I'm going to be working with Fonterra to commercialise this invention, and at the moment, they're going to allocate about $10 billion to the project, and we're going to look at commercialising it across the entire globe. Off the back of these inventions, I was selected as a finalist for Young New Zealander of the Year and was New Zealand Student of the Year for Business and Finance, and I've also received the Eureka National Science Award of Excellence 2 years running. All of this success was made possible in part by my science degree and the University of Canterbury. However, my life was not always like this. I grew up in Timaru and spent most of my childhood living on the infamous Tekapo Street, where one side of the street was Black Power and the other was Mongrel Mob. But I saw firsthand my parents work tirelessly to improve the lives of myself and my 2 sisters, as Dad saved to buy the business and Mum worked late night shifts, even when she was pregnant, stocking shelves at Pack and Save. So although I hated high school, I was dedicated to persevere as the first person from my family to attend university. Now looking back, I'm so glad I did, because it wasn't that I didn't enjoy learning, it was how I was being taught. I wasn't being challenged enough. It was at university that I came into my own. I was tested and elevated to reach my full potential. But you may ask yourself, why science and why the University of Canterbury? Well, let me explain sequentially. Firstly, we live in an ever-changing world. The Oxford Business Journal estimates that 60% of the world's current jobs will be made obsolete in the next decade. This is a scary statistic. In the whole history of humanity, there has not been such a large magnitude of change. It will far surpass the Industrial Revolution. You can view this in one of 2 ways. One, either you can be a helpless bystander and let the change happen to you, or 2, you can be at the forefront of innovation, and science plays a major part in that innovation and implementing these technologies in the world. It's for this reason that science is an amazing tool to attain, empowering you to become leaders of tomorrow. See, only 5 years ago, when I was your age, sitting in a similar room, concepts such as biological engineering, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and blockchain technology were barely in their infancy. I remember sitting in my classroom in year 13, and one of my mates was asking me, have you bought Bitcoin? He bought like $10 worth of Bitcoin, but I think he'd sold out. But if he had it now, it probably would have been about 100 grand. That just goes to show how much change we've had in such a small period of time. If I was in your enviable position, I would be utilising these technologies to the best of my ability, as you have the unique opportunity to become true pioneers across all of these fields. With that said, I would like to gift you some knowledge and wisdom that I've attained through university and through working in business. The first is take a wide variety of subjects across your degree. The more diverse, the better. The days of going to university and attaining a career for life are somewhat over. On average, each of you will have 8 different careers in your lifetime. The second is that the strongest tool in my experience is coupling science with business, as you can bring about real, long-lasting change and physically influence and improve people's lives. Just the other day, I had a young single mother, contact me, and she had a daughter called Jade. She said all Jade's life she couldn't go outside and play in the playground because of the bright light. It caused her to lose consciousness, and she'd been rushed to the ambulance, to the hospital several times. But with my technology of polar optics, she's able to go outside and play with her friends without worrying about the sunglasses falling off or going to lose consciousness and threatening her life. So it's examples like that that demonstrate that business and science can make a real difference. Don't get me wrong, researching has its merits, but you have to ask yourself, who is really reading any of your publications, and are you making a real difference to the world? In many cases you may be, in many cases you won't be. Finally, carve your own future. Don't be put in a box. As soon as you start your business and use your science knowledge to change the world, the better. This brings me to the final question of my presentation. Why the University of Canterbury? Well, the first reason is oddly the earthquakes. Yes, the earthquakes. See, the earthquakes enabled Canterbury to become more innovative as thousands of people were faced by a major life-threatening crisis. This brought everyone together and made everyone take an innovative approach to problems. This means that there's huge opportunity to grow in Christchurch and to bring about a real change that will improve people's lives. First year, I also stayed at Bishop Julius Hall of Residence, which was a great platform to explore Christchurch and see firsthand the amazing things we're doing in our city. In addition, UC has an amazing work-life balance with countless clubs and amazing holiday destinations, which I've travelled to throughout my study, including Hamner, Kaikoura, Arthur's Pass and Akaroa, just to name a few, who could honestly suffer from boredom when studying at the University of Canterbury. That also brings me to another important point. Studying isn't everything. Some of the greatest failings of the top students is that they just study. I would argue that socialising, making friends and networking is just as important. Personally, when I was at university, I met the love of my life, who I'm still with today, made countless friends and grew as a person, becoming not only more knowledgeable, which is very important, but also becoming emotionally intelligent, which is equally, if not more important. You could have some of the most inspired ideas in the world, but if you can't communicate or influence people from all walks of life to support you, you'll struggle to make an impact. My final reason for recommending the University of Canterbury is the UC Centre for Entrepreneurship, led by Dr. Rachel Wright. If you want to write it down, it's the UC Centre for Entrepreneurship. This centre is unlike anything offered at universities across the country. Here you can learn how to take your science knowledge and turn it into a fully operational company. As soon as you start university at Canterbury, I'd recommend signing up to this as soon as possible. I hope that I've shown you a clear insight as to why science is the subject to study and why the University of Canterbury is such an inspiration to grow not only professionally, but personally. I thank you all for your time in listening to this presentation, and I implore you to go out and change the world for the better. I'll now open up for any burning questions you guys might have.
Questions at the end, but actually, if anybody has questions for our first 3 speakers, there are prizes for people who ask questions, and they're coming. Are there questions for our first 3? Who wants to be an inventor? There's a budding inventor there and one up there. Yeah?
We're a pretty rare species.
Who wants to be a geologist? Yeah. Environmental scientist? Physicist? Yeah. Great. Okay, are there any questions for our first three speakers? We have some rugby tickets. Are there any rugby fans?
Get a rugby ticket.
Any rugby fans in the audience? Yeah. One rugby fan, is that it? Okay, a few other rugby fans.
It's a strange crowd.
Yeah, so start thinking of the way that you want to change the world to get in for those rugby tickets. And we do have a question there.
I just wanted to ask you. Oh, I can answer.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
How have you found your using your skills outside of
Good question.
Good question.
Okay, so the question was, how have I found using these skills, science, entrepreneurship, other than New Zealand, out in the world? I'm going to say this in a nice way. New Zealand is a very polite, the whole yeah, nah sort of phrase. So if I was to pitch to investors in New Zealand, they won't actually tell you if it's a bad idea or a good idea. They'll say it behind closed doors. When I was pitching to Johnson & Johnson, to your face, they will tell you that you're completely wrong, and they'll challenge you on the spot. So it's far more aggressive as well. So from idea conception to generation to making it a company is far shorter. Silicon Valley is like a month, could be generation, whereas New Zealand, 6 months to a year. So yeah, far more aggressive.
how did you actually get a hold of like Johnson & Johnson, for example? How do you approach a company like that?
Good question. Okay, this is a sly way that I do it. This is how I always approach people. So what I do is I go find the chief executive officer of the company. You always start top down, or the highest person you can find. They'll never have their email. They'll never have their phone number. So what you do is you take the end of the email, which will be at J&J in this case, .com, and then you just type in the multiple ways that their name could be. You'll laugh, and you put it as BCC, so they can't see who you've sent it to. So what you do is it would be, we'll take Chris Luxon, Air New Zealand. Chris.Luxon at Air New Zealand, C.Luxon, CEO at Air New Zealand, okay? Now, what the email will do is it will send you saying, okay, these emails didn't go through, these don't exist. But if one of the ones that you put in doesn't come back as wrong, even if they don't reply, you know you have the right one. And that is when you get the spam out and you just spam them. And sometimes as well, if I'm feeling really creative, I spend quite a lot of time in human resource consultancy. So what you do is you learn how to approach. So you're going to get to the receptionist, and their position is pretty much don't let people through. That's what they do. They're a filter. So you just have to socially engineer them to make you feel like you're incredibly important, and that if she'll get told off, make her fear that there'll be repercussions for not letting you through. So, for instance, let's say her name's his or her name. We'll just say her name's Rebecca. I'd be like, she'll say, "Good morning. This is so-and-so from so-and-so." And I'll be like, "Chris Luxon." Flat tone, authoritative, just the name and last name. And she'll be so scared to not put me through that 10 times out of 10 she'll put me through.
I saw, is there another question?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh.
No, you go.
Well, I just want to know your concept of the optical lens.
Mm-hmm.
How did you actually come up with that? Like, how did you from start to finish? Like, what was the process involved?
Yeah, okay, I'll just repeat the question. So the question was, how did I conceive of the idea, and what was the process of getting to the final product of polarized lenses? Right, so movies will show you that some scientist is sitting in a laboratory and suddenly has a eureka moment. That's complete. Yeah, we won't swear, but that's not correct at all. So it's all about learning and moving. So you have to understand the problem. Always start with the problem forget the solution. If you've already created a solution, you'll make the solution and it won't even fit the problem. So if you can understand a problem intimately, what I did was I just researched, talked to a whole bunch of people suffering from epilepsy and asked, okay, so what do you have now to solve it? And they say, oh, we're on medication, but it's really bad for us. It's actually damaging our cognition. And sunglasses. So I was like, okay, sunglasses, right? But they're like, oh, well, it doesn't cover the peripheral vision, so flashing light can cause me to have a fit, and they fall off. So I took that notion and built it into polarised lenses, and there was no one on the planet doing polarised lenses, and I thought it was crazy, so that's what led me to developing the concept.
There's a you in the blue.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I studied a Bachelor degree of Science. I did Psychology and Biology. I did a broad range of papers, like I'd recommend, because you want multiple skills. But then again, when you're at university, you should be learning outside of university as well. If you're committing all your time to just learning the papers, you'll just get into a groove and you won't actually challenge yourself. So what I did was I'd constantly go and look at all this new technology, read papers, because you have access to all of the UC's databases, which is amazing. Yeah, so you can read papers from all over the world, from any university. So yeah.
So like with that water emissions and purifying the water, so obviously with the way like science, like environmental science is going, it's becoming like almost a snowball effect because everyone's like making new ways to conserve. So like how do you deal with competitors who are coming up with very similar techniques and you get yours to be one that can fit?
Okay, good question. Did everyone hear that? Because I can repeat it if you want. Okay, I think I'm getting a lot of nods. Okay, so most conservation, there's a massive divide between people that are conservative about the environment and businesses, okay? You have scientists that will come up with conservation ideas that cost a lot of money, don't make any money, so aren't sustainable. In fact, 99% of conservation systems like that. What makes my approach different is that you can derive profit from the process that you're using. So the algae creates profit. There is a company called Alltech. They're a global farming company. They do something very similar. But really, at that point, what you're selling is why your science is better and why it's more profitable. So the business model, and it comes down to that. Yeah. Oh.
There's one in the back. We also have our first two speakers are they're just quietly hiding. Yeah.
Yeah,
the day job.
Good question. So at high school, I was a locksmith. In my spare time, my dad worked at a locksmithing company, and I wasn't a locksmith, but I was a padlock assembler. So you used to have the pins and put them in, and you know. And then after high school, I did a lot of labourer jobs, just on the side. Hard work, 12-hour days. But my dad was like, "I'll harden you up, right?" Like, so I had to go through that, which was good. And then I went into, like the method I said before, I went through first year and I was like, okay, I need to get a summer job. So I was like, how am I going to get a summer job? I'm just going to contact all the CEOs and see if they have internships. And if they don't have internships, ask them, well, the best companies have internships. Why don't you have an internship? So that's how I got my job at Enterprise Recruitment, which, it was rough. Yeah, but they threw me in the deep end and I enjoyed it, but I wouldn't do it as a career. So yeah, I have had a lot of different jobs.
Yes?
Oh, who inspired me? So to begin with, it was my dad, which is real sad, real happy moment. Yeah, so he, like I said, he was from a working class family, didn't have a father, had to support his family. And he didn't really finish high school either. So he worked within his company, saved up and bought the company, and now he owns 4 companies, and they're quite wealthy, but it was from grassroots. And then Rachel definitely inspired me. I remember pitching her an idea, and she said, "That's a stupid idea. I just finished doing a 10-minute presentation, and she's like, that's a stupid idea. Why would anyone do that?" But she made me so angry that I spent like the next week just like, I'm going to get this right. I'm going to show her wrong. And then went back and she still said it was stupid, but we moved on from there.
Great. Well, just before we go for our intermission supper break, we, within the College of Science, are working on designing a new science degree to, like we've been talking about, sort of be the change and give you the tools you need to change the world, especially with regards to global environmental change. And so we're working on this degree, and we'd like your input. So we'd love it if you would be willing to participate in a 2-minute online survey. And Sarah and the team are going to be handing out sign-up sheets if you'd be willing. So with that, we will break for our 20-minute intermission, and we'll see you back here in 20 minutes. Thank you.